hotel room in deepest England, and it's been quite a few days. I've come across to the water from the Isle of Wight to have a few days in different surroundings, having overwhelmingly been in the same surroundings for a long, long time for obvious reasons, and also to see a few people. And I thought it was bad on the Isle of Wight, but since I've come to mainland England, it's been clinically insane. And if you think back only to January and just ponder on what life was like then, and then compare it to now, it's almost beyond belief the scale of transformation in the time it's taken to happen. One thing I've noticed, I don't know whether you have, maybe it's just my bad misfortune, but those in authority seem to be getting more and more, authoritarian. I mean, I'm not talking about those in government, etc. I'm talking about those that you meet that are, part of security or running a business or employed by a business. They look upon you in strange terms, as if you are a danger, because that's what they've been told everyone is. But I mean, with suspicion, and it is driving people apart. And what I'm seeing as I've been travelling around England, I've been to Derby. I was going to Leicester, my home city, but they've locked that down. So I stayed just outside, well, I say just outside, in the east of the county. Well, actually the next county, Rutland, just across the border. And I've now come down to the southwest, and it's everywhere you go. And like I say, what I've noticed is a form of Stockholm syndrome. Now, for those who haven't come across that, Stockholm syndrome is a psychological term, which is a psychological response to danger, if you like. It is a definition. It occurs when hostages or abuse victims bond with their captors or abusers. This psychological connection develops over the course of the days, weeks, months, and even years of captivity or abuse. With this syndrome, hostages or abuse victims may come to sympathize with their captives. This is the opposite of the fear, terror, and disdain that might be expected for the victims of these situations. Over the course of time, some victims do come to develop positive feelings towards their captors. They may even begin to feel that they share common goals and causes. The victim may begin to develop negative feelings towards the authorities that are trying to catch whoever's holding them hostage. And they may resent anyone who is trying to help them escape from the dangerous situation they're in. And many psychologists and medical professionals consider Stockholm Syndrome a coping mechanism or a way to help victims handle the trauma of a terrifying situation. This is exactly what I'm seeing. Because, I've been stopped many times while I've been traveling around the last 4 days by people who have sussed it, and there's a lot of people who have seen through the nonsense and the lies, but the general population is almost apologizing. Sometimes it absolutely outwardly is apologizing for those that are imposing this fascistic imposition on human society. So you point out that something doesn't make sense or is ridiculous, contradictory, and people start defending the government, defending the authorities. It's Stockholm syndrome. Many psychologists and medical professionals consider Stockholm syndrome a coping mechanism or a way to help victims handle the trauma of a terrifying situation. And in the subconscious, as well as the conscious, but particularly the subconscious mind, people are feeling the trauma of a terrifying situation, even if that might not totally express itself consciously. So it's been a real eye-opener, even for me, to see the ease and totality with which so many people have just believe what they're told and then impose it on everyone else. You know, you talk to people who are saying you've got to do this, you've got to do that, and you say, well, can you explain why? And it's, well, the government says so, and we've got to do what the government says so we can stop the virus. And some of the things I've seen have been kind of extraordinary. There's been a spell cast on vast numbers of the population, with people just believing it without question. I went, when I was driving up initially from the Isle of Wight, I stopped for a cup of coffee at a service area on a motorway, and there was very little open. But anyway, there was a coffee shop open. So I went in, and they said they took cash, but only if I plonked it in a plastic container, which they then took off me and poured it into the till. And I said to them, so you do that because you reckon that you can get the virus from money and cash? Yeah. I said, well, why can't you get it from the coverings of the pies and the sandwiches that you've got lined up in your shelf? Oh, one said, it's because people only pick it up once. I said, well, did those sandwiches and pies just manifest on them shelves then? Did no one prepare them? Did no one put them together? Did no one stack the shelves? Oh, yes, she says. But these basic contradictions, people don't see until they're pointed out, and even then, often don't. You go into a hotel and they say, oh, you know, you've got to pay cashless rather. We're not going to take physical money. You've got to pay cashless. And then they hand you a receipt. And they hand you the room bill. What? And it's extraordinary. Everyone's got these masks on. In hotels, the waiters, waitresses, person on the desk, they've all got these masks on behind these perspex screens. And I was walking through Derby one morning, and I passed this hairdresser's, and there's this long queue of people waiting to go in 6 feet apart to have their hair done. And in front of them was this lady with a clipboard. And all I can say is she had a helmet on. She worked for the hairdressers. She had a helmet on that looked like she was going to do some welding. The sights you see these days is you never thought you would see. You know, I said when I was passing, I said, you know, what's been a chemical spill? What's going on? No, people waiting to get their hair cut. And I've just been testing the system out to see how it works. And you go into a pub, and outside or just at the door is someone with a mask on who wants to take your name and address, and and then you have to wash your hands with this sanitizer. And I'm making a point of telling them pleasantly that I ain't coming in because of that. And that's important, that they are aware that people are not just not coming because they're frightened of the virus, but because they don't want that experience. Thank you. Everywhere. I'll tell you the story, the most amazing story. When I was up in Derby, Derbyshire has some wonderful countryside. And there's a railway, an old railway. It's not there anymore, but it goes through the Derbyshire countryside, and it's now a walkway and a cycleway. And at one of the old stations called Miller's Dale, they've turned one of the old station buildings into a cafe, right? And I've been there before, and you go in and you buy a sandwich and a cup of tea or whatever you want, and then you sit down and eat it, either inside or outside. Well, I went this time, and first of all, you can't go in the cafe. You have to order, if you're taking it away, from a window. But right absolutely next to that is a place where you could sit down. You can sit down. And I can only describe it as a relatively large cupboard. It's very small. Well, and what you used to do is, if you wanted to sit inside, or if it was raining or something, you went in this place and you sat down and ate whatever you bought. Well, now there's a girl on the door to this cupboard inside area, and behind her are two tables 6 feet apart, as far as you can get, which is only about 6 feet in this place. And she's on the door, and there's a stool at the door so you can't get in, and she's standing behind it. And she said, "Do you want to sit down?" I said, "Yes, I would like to sit down." She says, "Well," and she picks her pad and pen up, and she says, "I just need your details, and you just have to wash your hands here with the sanitizer." And I said, "What? To walk no more than 5 feet and sit down in what was then an empty cupboard with two tables on my own, and you want my name and address for me to eat a sandwich and have a cup of tea?" It's so insane. And where I am now today, down in the west of England, in the countryside, I went to the tourist office this morning because I wanted to know where the footpaths were so I could go for a little walk through the countryside, which I love doing. And so there's the tourist office, small little office, because it's only a small place. And so the lady running it is behind her desk and perspex sheet. And I'm standing at the door. And I said, "Can you tell me where there are footpaths around here to take you through the countryside? I want to go for a walk." "Oh, yes," she says. So I walk about 2 steps towards her, nowhere near her. And she says, "Oh, sorry, can you wash your hands with the sanitizer first?" And I said, "No, I can't, because I don't wash my hands with sanitizer or anything else just to be told where the bloody footpaths are in a tourist office." And she told me where they were without washing my bloody hands. But most people, they don't resist this. They don't say no. They just go along with it. And while we do, they'll just keep upping the ante and making it more extreme. Some of the things I've seen this week, you would never think you would ever see. Another interesting thing is when you pick up conversations around you. And I was having something to eat last night, and on the next table, actually 2 tables away, the place was empty apart from me and them. There was a conversation going on among people, and it was very clear what they were discussing. One of the people there had an elderly relative who just died, and he was complaining to the other two that the relative died of something else, nothing to do with COVID-19. And COVID-19 went on the death certificate. And he couldn't understand why they were doing it. Well, it's obvious why they were doing it, if people do a modicum of research, and that's to inflate the figures and make it look like there is a virus, and that it's something deadly that we have to protect ourselves from. And if you don't do that unless you have death figures, so they redesignate people dying of other things to be COVID-19, and it's being done systematically with financial incentives as well as pressure from the top of the pyramids in each country for doctors and medical staff to do that. And I was, like I say, just outside Leicester for a couple of days. Leicester's the city where I was born. And for people who may not have come across this around the world, they've just locked Leicester down again. And they've done it because they say that there's been a rise in cases, a big rise in cases in Leicester. And so they've locked everything down. This is just after a lot of businesses just got going again for a few days and now shut them down again. And the reason is, and the scam is, and this is being played more and more now, that the World Health Organization and this complete crook called Tedros, who officially runs it, but Bill Gates runs it, he has been saying that the way to deal with the virus is, quote, test, test, test. And he's saying that because he knows the test is not testing for COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2. It's testing for a genetic material. And these tests are subject to what they call amplification. They take this genetic material and they amplify it, kind of akin to blowing up a picture. And the more they blow it up, the more they amplify it, the more the test picks up elements of this genetic material. So if you amplify it a certain number of times, then people will test positive and negative because some will have elements of this genetic material which has been amplified so the test picks it up, and some won't. But if you keep amplifying it, you bring out so much of the genetic material that virtually everyone is going to test positive because some of that genetic material will be in everybody. And so what they've been doing is increasing the tests in Leicester. Before the test numbers went up, the so-called infection rate went up. It's not. It's ludicrously not. Before the test infection rate went up, there was one testing centre in Leicester. And then they introduced another 7. And the infection rate positives for this test not testing for the virus increased to the point where they said, we've got to lock down Leicester. And now we're having this story. Coronavirus experts, well, who says they are? They've not even purified the virus to show it exists. That's how expert they are. Coronavirus experts, and they use that term, the media, they use that term expert because they want people to think, well, if it's an expert, then what they say must be true. the fact that they're not expert at all, that's never taken into consideration. Coronavirus experts warn infections 75% higher than thought in past few days as more test positive, and as I've said in the headline, for a virus in a test, not testing for a virus. And so the more they're testing worldwide, the more cases they are putting in the numbers column. And they're saying, oh, the pandemic's growing. And all they're doing is testing people positive for something that's not the virus that they say they're testing for. Absolutely provable fact. There's not supposition. This is fact. And this is where the numbers are coming from. And so because, according to the British Lung Foundation, the rate of respiratory disease drops dramatically in the summer. 80% of respiratory disease is in the winter months. And so there's not the respiratory disease in the summer months in the Northern Hemisphere to keep redesignating COVID-19 when it's caused by something else. You see the graphs, you see the flu numbers, the flu deaths in 2020 have gone down compared with other years as the COVID-19 deaths have gone up. I mean, it's just redesignation, that's all it is, of what people have always died of. And a lot of other things that are nothing to do with respiratory disease that that COVID-19 has been on the death certificate and therefore gone on the death figures. So what they've had to do in these summer months in the Northern Hemisphere is move from deaths to cases and frighten people with cases. So the more testing they're doing, the more cases they're getting, not of COVID-19, but of people testing positive for elements of this genetic material. So the number of people infected with coronavirus every day in England is 75% higher than previously thought, experts have revealed. Who are these experts? Who says they're experts? Have any of them produced the paper, any paper, that says, yes, we've purified and isolated the virus to show it exists? No, none of them. And the infection rate is now the source of terrifying people into submission. And here we have another story. Biggest global daily increase in new COVID-19 cases reported, official data shows. And as I've said in the headline, because the more you test people with a test not testing for the virus, the more positives you get that are not positives for the virus, but you claim they are, which pretty much sums it up. This is going on all over the world. And just look at this whole pandemic theme and this pandemic phenomenon. And you see that things happen as one unit. They happen in one country, they happen in lots of countries at the same time. And another development this week, which is the scam going onto another level, is this. It's on the BBC website. Coronavirus, World Health Organization rethinking how COVID-19 spreads in air. Now, as I've said many times in the last few months, the reason they've created the illusion of a virus that actually doesn't exist is because it means they have complete control of it by controlling the attributes of it. See, if you have a real virus, you are limited to the consequences, the health consequences of that virus or infection agent, shall we say, because I keep putting this rider in because it's very important. There is no scientific proof ever been produced that what they call a virus causes disease. It's never been done. But if you invent a virus, if you invent an infectious agent, then you're not limited by the bounds of what that infectious agent is capable of. You're creating it, so you can attribute to it anything you like. So they keep adding the symptoms. Symptoms keep increasing all the time, so that when people get these now long range of symptoms, they think they've got COVID-19, and the medical profession confirm they have. And now they're saying that this virus can be spread in the air. And the reason for this is that they want to use that as an excuse to further increase the impositions on the population. They're already saying, because it looks like that they're spread suspended in the air, evidence for that is nil. But all they've got to do is say it, and vast numbers of people believe it. Then we've got to have more people wearing masks in public and what have you, because it's traveling in the air. So, like I say, when you've created the illusion of a virus, the only limitation on the attributes you can attribute to it are what you can sell to the public, which is, in many cases, a serious amount. So this is the story on the BBC website. The World Health Organization has acknowledged there is emerging evidence that the coronavirus can be spread by tiny particles suspended in the air. And the World Health Organization is driving this because it's a cult front. Bill Gates is the guy who is running it on behalf of the cult, and Tedros, the Director General, is just a puppet of both Gates and the cult. So they'll put out whatever is going to advance the agenda of the cult. And you've got Silicon Valley saying we're going to censor anyone who questions what the World Health Organization says. And so you have the control of information and the narrative. Anyway, this is what the BBC website said. The airborne transmission could not be ruled out in crowded, closed or poorly ventilated settings, an official said. If the evidence is confirmed, it may affect guidelines for indoor spaces. An open letter from more than 200 scientists who had accused the WHO of underestimating the possibility of airborne transmission. The WHO has so far said the virus is transmitted through droplets when people cough or sneeze. So that gets you so far, you see. The virus transmitted through droplets when people cough and sneeze, that gets you so far in your impositions on society and people, the population. But if you can say it is traveling around in the air, then you can up the imposition to meet the threat of this virus going around in the air. And this is at a time when more and more people are said to have been infected. They haven't been. It's to do with, like I say, the test. But the number of people dying from this stuff, even officially, is going down. But the refocus from deaths to infections has kept the whole thing bubbling and has kept the impositions being rolled out. And wait till we get to the winter when they come back to deaths, when colds, flu, etc., as happens every year, start to happen in 2020. So this is definitely not an attack on the WHO, said the scientists. It's scientific debate. Well, it's not. There's no science going on. It's nonsense. But they felt they needed to go public because they were refusing to hear the evidence after many conversations with them. Yeah, sure they were. So the point of this change to it travels in the air opens the way for the imposition of permanent mask wearing in public places, which is exactly what the agenda is. They have put billions under house arrest, and they'll return to that in the winter. And now they're putting billions with masks on their face, or face nappies, as some people call them. And because people do not research their opinions, but just believe what they're told, large numbers of people, the majority of people I'm talking about, not everybody, then whatever nonsense the authorities spout, the public just react to it. And there's this other thing that I've been noticing as I've been traveling around. I've met a number of people that work in hotels and restaurants who don't believe in all of it. Some poor bloke, I say some poor bloke, there's lots of them. Every time someone gets up from a table, they have to go over with the sanitizer, and they have to rub every surface with this sanitizer stuff. God, it must drive them crazy. Well, I know, because I've spoken to a few of them, it does. But a lot of them do see through it and do think it's ridiculous. But here's how it works. The authorities, the government, tell businesses, if you're going to reopen, this is what you have to do. And if you don't do it, we'll close you down. And then the business owners tell the staff, this is what you've got to do. And if you don't do it, then you'll lose your job. And so you have this, like I've said before, this imposition acquiescence sequence all the way through the system, which means that there are large numbers of people who don't believe for a second in the validity of what they're being told to do, but they do it because they're trying to protect their job. But there has to come a time, because this is not going to stop. It's not going to stop where it is. There has to come a time when people think, well, I've got nothing to lose. There is a possibility, it's only a possibility, that when even more people lose their jobs as these next few months unfold, that people will be in that situation of, I've got nothing left to lose. And maybe then we can start engaging with the system and not just constantly acquiescing to it.